And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How are we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with Scoop Duck on 3, coming to you from Long Beach, California. We got some breaking news to get into as 2025 running back Dierre Hill has committed to Oregon. But before we get into that, the Ducks Dish podcast is brought to you in part by Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your dinner plans are tonight, but you should head on over to Ranchito Grill at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Try their homemade tortillas. They got great food, great environment, and they will take care of you. Say what's up to my guy Ruben and let him know that Max Torres sent you. Not rolling solo. I got my guy Justin Hopkins here on the pod to get into today's big news. J-Hop, how we doing, man? Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here and excited to talk about Oregon's newest commitment.
Absolutely. So let's get into just some of the biographical details here with Dierre Hill. He is a 2025 running back / athlete, listed at 5'10 and a half, 180 pounds, out of Althoff Catholic High School in Belleville, Illinois. He comes in as a 4-star recruit on the On3 industry ranking, 91.99, the number 140 player in the country, the number 6 athlete, and the number 5 recruit in the state of Illinois. Justin, I believe this is a guy who was named Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Illinois, and this is just a super versatile recruit. And I just love this addition for Oregon. I know you and I both kind of saw this one coming.
Yeah, one thing that we've talked about before, you and I, and and on the site as well, is how Oregon really likes those versatile defensive players, right? We've talked about guys that can play corner or safety and linebacker, move around from the edge or line up on the line of scrimmage. And I think they're looking for some of that on offense this year too, is why I mentioned that. I think Dierre Hill is a guy that you can line up in the backfield, that you can move to the slot. First thing that I think of is jet sweep comes to mind when you think of a guy like this, built the way he is. That kind of versatility has a lot of appeal in this offense to Will Stein. And I will, say the reason I say that is because they're also recruiting, Michael Terry, also another athlete, but a totally different type of athlete. That's a guy that could play receiver or tight end or kind of be a hybrid role there. So I think they're looking for that versatility on offense. And that's what Hill brings to the table. Just 100% reminds me of DeAnthony Thomas, but with like 20 more pounds on him.
Sure. Yeah. And Dierre Hill is a special talent when you throw on the tape and you watch this guy do his thing. Justin, we've got the highlights rolling here on the Scoop Duck YouTube channel. Reminder to like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. But I remember I was talking to a source close to this recruitment a little while ago, and they were telling me that Oregon kind of looked at Dierre Hill as kind of a Jahmyr Gibbs mold of a back. And I think if you look at what Jahmyr Gibbs is doing in Detroit with the Lions right now, I think Oregon fans would like that because this is a guy who can do just a little bit of everything. I think I really liked how Oregon's running backs have gotten involved catching the ball out of the backfield. You look at what Bucky Irving did last year, catching more than 50 balls in this Will Stein offense. So the more guys at the end of the day that you can add that can do a lot of different things, I think you're setting yourself up for some success. And I think also if you're just looking at some big picture stuff with momentum, I think the Ducks host a guy like Dierre Hill for the spring game, and then you're able to parlay that into a commitment not too long after, which is a bonus.
Yeah, and I love your point because I honestly was just sitting here thinking about it, but noting how many more catches Bucky Irving had this year. And I think that that's something Oregon really wants to feature in the offense, having that pass catching running back, not only because it's another threat, but also because it's another safety valve. If you're the quarterback and things aren't working downfield, knowing you've got that guy you can swing the ball to out wide, that really stretches a defense. Linebackers have to make decisions. Corners have to make decisions. It just kind of opens up the playbook a little bit. And watching Hill's highlights, it's clear that this isn't just a pure speed guy. He doesn't have a problem putting his shoulder down and making some contact. Of course, he's not a 225-pound Derrick Henry going to bowl you over, but strong enough to stay on his feet. You can see really sees the creases really well, great vision just to kind of hit the open field. And then he's a problem. We saw him returning kicks just a few minutes ago, just kind of adds to his ability all around. So, yeah, just having that jack of all trades on offense really makes you versatile. And again, it helps your quarterback too, because now you've got another safety valve out there when things fall apart.
One of the things that excites me about Hill that you mentioned, Justin, is his top end speed, because it's not like Oregon's recruiting slow running backs, but I feel like this is a faster back than we've seen come through Eugene in recent years. You look at Dejon Dink-Riggs out of St. John's in DC, and then Jaden Lamar as well, Dante Dowdell. Those are some of the recent backs that they were able to get, and then Jay Harris as well. So those are all guys that I think are capable of hitting the home run, but maybe not to the same degree as a guy like Hill. So I think this is a great addition for the Ducks. The Ducks were able to beat out some pretty strong competition. You have schools like Ohio State, Ole Miss, the in-state Illinois Fighting Illini, and the Missouri Tigers as all ones that were in the mix here for Dierre Hill. And for me, Justin, one of the big picture things that I like about this addition, I'll kind of let you run with this, and then I'll respond. I feel like this is the perfect way for Rashad Samples to get things rolling with the Ducks after he comes over from Arizona State.
Yeah, that's a great point. No, I mean, I think if you're Coach Samples, you come in, you finish spring ball, which was really important. Didn't have a lot of time to prep for that. And, so obviously you're trying to recruit on top of that. And I think that, like you said, this is a perfect way for him to get the ball rolling. It's not like he just beat out Kansas State and Texas Tech or whatever for this guy. Like you said, this guy had some legit offers, was being, coveted by Ohio State. And let's not forget, that means that Ohio State and Coach Loughlin, who was recruiting Hill while he was at Oregon, kind of had a leg up on him in terms of relationship and time to establish that relationship versus Coach Samples. So, kudos to Coach Samples for kind of getting that done and just really solidifying, confidence in Hill of his ability to coach and developing a relationship and just kind of getting him to Oregon. So, yeah, I think, I know we could talk about it in a bit, but I think, like you said, this is Coach Samples, kind of like first taste of recruiting blood, if you will, at Oregon. And I got a feeling it's not going to be the last for him.
Yeah. And with I like your point about having the upper leg there, because we did see that Ohio State offer come in for Dierre Hill after Carlos Loughlin took that job. And that was really one of my questions when I went to, I didn't ask him, but I was trying to figure out when I talked to Dierre Hill after that visit for the spring game, is just, I know he liked Carlos Loughlin. I mean, every recruit I talk to, I feel like does. So what was that departure going to mean for Dierre Hill and the Ducks? So Rashad Samples comes in, and I think he navigated that transition about as well as you could have. And coming out of that interview following that visit, Hill was saying all the right things about Oregon. And I think that they were in just as good of a spot as you could have hoped for when you have a shakeup at your position coach and a pretty pivotal part of your recruitment. So I think that this is awesome too, because it's not a Texas guy. So it's not like Rashad Samples' first commitment is like, oh yeah, well, he's from Texas, so obviously they're going to be able to get it done. You go into a different part of the country, and to be honest, Justin, a part that Oregon doesn't do a whole lot of work in traditionally, at least in my time covering the team, if we're calling Chicago Illinois rather, more of that Midwest blueprint, because there's some really good players out of the Midwest, but kind of how, as we've seen over the past couple cycles, Dan Lanning's trying to push the Ducks into any area that he really can.
Yeah. I mean, there's talent all over the country, right? So it's kind of up to you to lean on those relationships and be able to break into any new area and build new relationships. But like you said, yeah, the Midwest hadn't exactly been a recruiting hotbed for Oregon, but we know there's talent there. I mean, schools like Iowa and Michigan have lived in the Midwest for years, Kansas State, and really mined that talent out of their blueprint there. And so, yeah, to be able to kind of crack in there, for Oregon, we know, Coach Lanning, dating back to his roots in Missouri, has always kind of wanted to get back there a little bit. Watching some of these highlights, one thing I love about Hill, and hopefully folks watch it or go back, he's almost always going north-south, like a little bit east-west here, but he looks to cut upfield as soon as he can. Waste little movement going east-west. I mean, just really looks to lean forward and get going uphill. And I love to see that out of running backs. I'm not a big fan of the guys that head to the sideline and then start going up. So something I've just kind of noted here about Hill is just, even though he's 180 or whatever the case might be. He looks to get north-south as soon as he can, and I love that.
You got to get that because I feel like there's too many guys that maybe rely on their speed at the high school level or their agility. That doesn't work when you get to college. I mean, maybe it works sometimes, but you can't get in that habit of reversing fields. And I think that's not something you're going to have to worry about if you're a Duck fan with this newest commitment in Dierre Hill. And now that the Ducks have this commitment in the full, Justin, their offensive class is rounded into shape even more. I think that they have a commitment rather at every position except for tight end, and they had offensive line, but Sandman Thompson decommitted. So now you're looking for tight end and offensive line in this 2025 class for the Ducks. And that has a lot of really, really good skill talent. And we know that Oregon has the ability to be selective. So for them to get Dierre Hill here, I think speaks volumes to their confidence in him, like we discussed. And I think it's going to lead to more good things in this class.
Absolutely. And, I won't parlay it too much yet, but I mean, Oregon, one of their top tight end targets is set to commit here in the coming weeks. So they might fill yet another spot there at tight end. And like you said, it's really taken shape. What I like is it really feels like, these are all guys that are, how do I want to phrase it? These are all, kind of like first level guys that they said, hey, look, we like these guys. We would take their commitment, not fallback options. Right. And that's kind of what I always look for. Of course, you still have big fish like Jordan Davison or DeCorian Moore, or you name that 5-star or high 4-star, those guys are, of course, must take, first level kind of guys. But, Dierre Hill is a guy that Oregon targeted early on before Coach Lachlan left, before Coach Samples arrived, and decided, hey, this guy we really like and would take, and were able to close on, as was Cooper Perry, as was Isaiah Mosey, as was Akili Smith Jr. I just love that basically all these guys, if they didn't commit till July or August, I think they would still be, takes for Oregon. So again, I just love that they're not filling up with, well, let's get some guys on the commit list and move us up in the rankings a little bit. These are all guys that they're going to hope that they keep and hold on to, at the end of the recruiting cycle.
So let's focus on Samples a little bit more here, Justin, and kind of his early body of work here with the Ducks. And then we'll get into a little bit more about what's next for the Ducks at running back, because I feel like Rashad Samples has kind of been making some headlines here, or at least garnering some attention on the recruiting trail this week. Even if you look at where he's been, he stopped in Oklahoma and then he stopped in Texas. And I think the big talk with him, the big development this week, is that the Ducks offered Keelan Russell, 2025 Duncanville quarterback, that's currently verbally committed to SMU, excuse me. And well, we kind of saw this coming, right? We thought that Samples was going to try to tap into those roots, tap into those connections at Duncanville. And I think that's exactly what you want to see as they look to swing for the fences and not only get a second quarterback, but maybe a little bit more on top of that.
Yeah. And I mean, Keelan Russell, he's one of those guys that, quite honestly, his stock's risen about as much as anybody else this spring, at least through the evaluation period so far. So, committed to SMU early on, and then all of a sudden, started having a couple good camps, a good Elite 11 showing, and, Alabama and some heavyweights have come offering and started recruiting him. Texas is another one that has yet to offer, but it feels like that might be even imminent from Texas. So, as far as that goes, I think Russell's a guy that both you and I talked about for the last, few weeks, at least, saying, hey, keep an eye on this guy, keep an eye on this. There's a development there. Obviously, the offer comes through. Both you and I expected that. And I think that, that's Coach Samples realizing, hey, look, this is a guy that we want. It helps us crack into Duncanville. We're looking at an elite quarterback here. Oh, and he just so happens to have a 5-star receiver with him, and that might help our cause there. So, yeah, I think it's all smart. This isn't where you're offering Russell, as like, well, okay, we really want DeCorian Moore, but we'll take Russell too. This isn't a bonus pickup. This is, hey, this is a legit dude. This guy makes our team better. And it just so happens that it might help over here or with future guys at Duncanville, which they're like modern day of Texas. They're going to keep reloading every year, right? So, I love what Coach Samples been able to do. And like we said, just here in the last 2 weeks, kind of transitioning from spring football into recruiting, and we're seeing him out on the road. And, I think that he came in as a highly touted recruiter, and I think we're going to definitely see that pay off over the next few months.
And with this guy, with Keelan Russell, he's a name that I was kind of starting to track. I want to say maybe back in like January or so, I was hearing a little bit about him, but then I saw that SMU commitment, and I was like not really making too much of it because we don't really think too much of SMU, right? But I think they're doing some special things as far as just trying to flip the narrative and get some top tier players to play and be Mustangs. I think that's their mascot. But you watched some of the tape from Keelan Russell, and this guy can flat out go. I think he's got incredible feel for the pocket and knowing when to run and just feeling the plays develop. Tons of arm talent and ability to throw on the run and improvise. And granted, you don't want to get too comfortable and do that all the time. I think that's part of my main concern with Caleb Williams at the NFL level is you can't improvise all the time because you're not always going to be able to out athlete and out skill people. But with a guy like Keelan Russell, I think that he has really solidified himself as one of the few quarterbacks that the Ducks are still looking at here in the 2025 class with Achilles Smith Jr. already in the fold. I think it's probably Keelan Russell and then Hassan Longstreet, who's verbally committed to Texas A&M. He's kind of been one of those names that's floating out there as well. So just to double down on your point, this isn't a guy that I think they're strictly going after just to get to DeCorian Moore. But, man, if you can get both of those guys, that would be a phenomenal haul. And I think it's honestly not that unrealistic given what the Ducks have been able to do on the transfer portal and on the recruiting trail lately.
Yeah, the early buzz, at least with regards to Russell and this offer, which I know is less than 24 hours old right now. Oregon, it definitely let him know they were interested for a while here for a couple months. And, early word is he's highly interested. I mean, just look at what the offense has been doing. What I really like about Russell as we see these highlights here is, this is a guy that's a passer that can run, right? He's not just always looking to tuck the ball and run upfield, even though we know he can. You can see from the film, this guy can definitely run. Long strider, really elusive, but he's always got his eyes downfield, looking to make those completions. Again, I refer to him as a passer that can run, not the other way around. So really like that. Not all these passes are going to DeCorian Moore. He's spreading the ball around, all over the yard. Just lots of things to like here. And one of my favorite things is week in and week out, he's going against big-time competition. You're in Texas. You're at a high level. You're seeing good talent. You're seeing, physical guys. You're seeing big guys on the defensive line. It's not just some guy that's racking up a gazillion yards because he's playing against the JV team every week. So a lot of things to like about Russell. And I think SMU is hoping and praying that they get to hold on to him. And that doesn't just mean Oregon. I mean, Texas, Bama, everybody's coming after him. So
let's talk a little bit more, Justin, on the back end of the show here about what's next for Oregon at running back following the commitment of Dierre Hill here in the 2025 class. If you follow Oregon recruiting, you know which name's coming right out of the gate. It's Jordan Davison out of Mater Dei. Just recently had a chance to catch up with Jordan Davison. That story is up on the site right now on scoopduck.com. And really, Justin, this one feels like it's an Oregon versus Ohio State race, even though he has a top four that also includes Michigan and Alabama. No decision timeline just yet for Jordan Davison, but he is going to be taking an official visit to all four of his finalists. And boy, this is really the single name I think that you got to know. There's probably some more that we're going to have to discuss or will be on the table later. But if you're Rashad Samples, he's right at the top of your wish list.
Yeah, and I I don't know if it's necessary that he has to take two backs in this cycle. Like I think they would, and I think they certainly could. I don't think you have to, and we know that because A, you got to make sure that you're taking somebody that you really want, and B, we know that you could supplement in the transfer portal if you really wanted to, or if you needed to. So I think you're right. You look at Jordan Davison right away. Again, we're seeing the residue of Rashad Samples already here. And I know you talked to him, so I don't want to steal your thunder, but from your conversation with him, he said, hey, Oregon was darn near out, right? I was kind of ready to cut them off the list after Lachlan left. I wasn't really sure what was going on. But Coach Samples came in and I took the visit and they're right back on the list, obviously in the top four, which is a great spot for Oregon to be. And I'm like you, I agree. I think that this is Oregon and Ohio State right now. I think those are the two that you have to watch probably the whole way down the stretch. And to be blunt, I think Ohio State holds the edge right now, and I think you believe the same. So, this is where Coach Samples needs to come in and probably do a little bit of heavy lifting and do some work. And at the end of the day, should he happen to land Davidson or make it really close, whatever the case might be, we can kind of say, hey, look, that was a really good litmus test, if you will, for Coach Samples and what he's able to do on the recruiting trail. Because I think at this point, if you'd say, hey, Jordan Davison ends up at Oregon, that is a huge, huge feather in the cap for Coach Samples to kind of be able to, flip that script like that. They're not there yet. They still have work to do, but let's just say in a few months that does happen. That really shows you his recruiting chops right there.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And maybe something that helps Oregon here. We say it a lot, but I feel like this is a perfect time to bring it into the conversation. This is why you don't limit the recruiting to just one dude. You don't have just one guy on your staff talking to a guy, because if a guy leaves, like just happened with Carlos Loughlin, you have a relationship that he's talking about with Coach Lanning, with Coach Stein. He loves how he fits in this offense, specifically the ability that he has to catch passes out of the backfield. So those are all things that are going in Oregon's favor. But yeah, I do think that this is Ohio State's to lose at this time. But that said, with what we've seen from Dan Lanning and the rest of the Ducks on the recruiting trail, I feel like it's a little too early to call, especially because we don't have a decision timeline right now. If we had a commitment date that he was working around, then we could kind of see, okay, where does the Ohio State visit fall? Where does the Oregon visit fall? We're not too sure, but I can say with a lot of confidence that this is looking like Oregon versus Ohio State. And I just talked on a recent episode of the pod with Big Ten Ted about that Ducks versus Bucks rivalry. Maybe it's too soon to call it that, but my God, we're going to see Oregon and Ohio State going toe to toe quite a bit here. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on. And I'm going to be curious, like you said, Justin, if they do want to take two backs in this class, and if they do, and one of them isn't Jordan Davison, how do they pivot? What does the rest of that board look like? Do they stay with some of the guys that they had on their radar previously? Does Samples bring some new guys to the fold? Not too sure how that would work. But either way, this is going to be a battle that we have to keep our eye on until the very end.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with one of the 2 points I'll make on Davidson. As we close that, the things that you look for moving forward are, okay, when do the official visits fall? Is Oregon last? Is Ohio State last? Does he push them past June and take them in late July, or does he take them during season? Those are things we look at. And along with that is kind of timeline, because I think the sooner he makes a commitment, the worse that is for Oregon, if that makes sense. So you get him to kind of push back and say, hey, I'm going to make a decision the middle of July or the end of July. I think that's enough time for Oregon to mount its attack, if you will, and possibly close the gap. If he says, hey, I'm going to make my decision mid-June, you're probably counting on him being a Buckeye at that point. So those are the things I think we're looking at here moving forward.
So just to wrap this one up with Davison, Loughlin was able to make the trip out to SoCal and see him at Mater Dei earlier this week. I'm not sure if anybody from Oregon has been in to see him. He didn't mention that when I interviewed him, but I would think that Samples would probably want to get down to SoCal to get some FaceTime with him if that's possible. But these guys are all over the country, so you never know where they're going to pop up. I know that Chip Kelly was another guy that came to see him along with Loughlin now that he's at Ohio State. Got to meet Chip Kelly at the Sierra Canyon Showcase earlier this week. He was like about to leave, and I was like, oh man, like as someone who covers Oregon, I got to go say what's up to Chip. So that was kind of a fun interaction. But yeah,
he's actually a really personable guy, and people don't realize that, like in person.
Yeah, I didn't get to talk to him too much. It was very, it was kind of as he was heading out, but I just wanted to introduce myself and say what's up. So hopefully I can catch him again and maybe have a little bit more of a conversation. But I think Oregon does have some momentum now, just because they were able to pull off that spring game visit, which kind of, like we said, kept them in the game here. So we're going to have to see what happens with that Jordan Davison one. He told me that official visit dates should be coming out soon. He said releasing to the public. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how big this recruitment has become. But Oregon is right there in it. Justin, any final thoughts here on the Dierre Hill commitment or Jordan Davison? Anything else that's going on with Oregon recruiting before we get out of here?
No, not really. Just nice to see Oregon, get some new blood, if you will. Landed a few commitments, obviously a couple in the transfer portal, Derek Harmon, Peyton Woodyard, but just kind of getting the ball rolling. Nasir Wyatt a week ago. Now you've got Dierre Hill. A couple guys have made commitment plans for the end of June. June's just going to be massive, right? June's turning into the month in terms of recruiting, because it's showing you a couple things. It's showing you two things, really. Obviously, it's a huge official visit month for everybody, and it's showing you who has interest in your program, because they're going to take a visit to your program and using. I know kids can take more than 5 official visits now, but very few do. Very few are taking more than 5. They really are taking 4 or 5, and a few are taking 6 here and there, but you don't see anybody lining up 10 official visits. And I don't blame them. That's a lot. But along with the second thing is, with those kids visiting and showing you interest on their end, who shows up to Oregon is really showing you who the staff is interested in, because these are official visits and they're using them in June. So if they don't feel at least a little bit good about some of these guys, they're not going to host them in June. They're going to wait and push back, into the fall or whatever the case might be for some of those guys. So kind of a real measuring stick, if you will, and gives us a real good barometer of, hey, these are the 35 guys that we should probably have on our immediate board of, potentials to commit to Oregon, very interested in Oregon, and the Ducks really have a lot of interest in. So very, very big month coming up.
Big month on tap for the Ducks, and they stay hot. On Friday, landing a commitment from 2025 running back Dierre Hill, some momentum for new running backs coach Rashad Samples, and we'll continue tracking the latest updates, as you guys know, over on scoopduck.com. Try us out right now. Subscribe. We got a great community over there, and you know that Justin and I are putting in the work along with Steve Wolfong and Chad Simmons. So that's the place to be if you like following Oregon football recruiting. But before we get out of here, make sure you tap in with Justin on Twitter/X at jhopkinssd. If you want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at mtorresports. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Scoop Duck on 3. And then share the show, share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. But until next time, thanks to Justin for coming on, and thank you to you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.